Well, good morning and welcome to our Bible study here at Walnut Grove Church of Christ. We welcome our visitors. We have visitors in our audience. That's always good to have you with us. And we welcome those that are joining us by way of social media. I don't have any new sick to add to the list, those that are listed in the bulletin. It's good to have Steve Edwards back with us, and he still continues to improve and hopefully continues on that path. Rhonda is continuing her recovery at home. But I don't have any others. I have, of course, Roger Irwin's been moved to a regular room, and those that are listed in the bulletin need to make note of. Are there any others that need to be noted at this time? If you do have others, let me know after Bible study, and we'll certainly add those to the list. If you would you bow with me for a word of prayer before we begin our Bible study? Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the day, for the blessings that we so richly enjoy, and for the privilege that we have to call thee our Father. We ask that the things that we do and say will be in accordance to thy will, be a blessing to each and every one that participates. Father, forgive us of our sins, our shortcomings. We ask for a home in heaven with thee when our lives are over. For this is our prayer in Christ's name, and amen.
Good morning. All right, as usual, when I do class, we're going to be in the Psalms today, and normally I kind of am chronologically going through the Psalms, so I skip a few in between when I'm here and when I'm other places. But been so busy with other things lately that I really haven't been doing many classes. So last time we were in Psalm 14, and this time we'll be in Psalm 15. So if you want to turn to Psalm 15, a Psalm of David. This is a short one, and I say that often with some of these beginning ones, and I talk about getting done early, and then I usually feel like I don't have enough time, so I'm not going to talk about getting done early, but if we do, we do. We'll see. Do what? You don't expect that. All right. There's a lot to gain from these 5 verses in this psalm. As usual, I'm going to go ahead and read through the psalm, then we'll kind of break it down, look at how it really applies to David and definitely how it applies to us. Psalm 15, a psalm of David. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle, who may dwell in your holy hill? He who walks uprightly and works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised. But he honors those who fear the Lord. He who swears to his own hurt and does not change. He who does not put out his money at usury, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. Interesting thing about the Psalms is many of them are actually poetic. And this is one of those Psalms that's actually very poetic. And of course, if you're thinking about what I just read, you're like, well, I didn't hear any rhymes. Right, and of course it's not a poetry of necessarily syllable or rhymes like the way we would normally think of poetry, but it's more of poetry of thought. And you'll see this a lot in the Psalms, where it's basically there'll be a line and then something that adds to that line. It basically repeats that thought and then it goes into it just a little bit deeper and gets a little bit deeper meaning out of it. And so that's kind of the poetry that we see in this psalm, is there'll be a concept covered, and then David will expound on that just a little bit more. This first line here, Lord, shall we abide in thy tabernacle? So he's asking the question here, Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? So who's gonna be in the tabernacle? Who shall dwell in that holy hill? And so you see that first line, who's going to stay in the tabernacle? Who's going to abide in the tabernacle, and then it kind of adds to it, who's going to dwell in thy holy hill? So really, same question here. He's not really asking anything different necessarily, but it does get into it a little bit deeper. So what's a tabernacle? We know from studying the Old Testament, what is a tabernacle? A movable church. That's a good way to describe it. Even simpler than that. A tent, right? Yeah, the tabernacle is a tent. A very fancy tent when we're generally studying the Old Testament with very specific things laid out. But it is that movable, I like that word there, that movable church, right? That movable dwelling, that tent. You don't set up a tent and think, well, this tent's going to stay here forever, right? You don't think of that. But David wanted to build the temple, right? David desired for there to be a temple. He didn't like the thought of God living in a tent, right? Dwelling in a tent. That just wasn't good enough for David. Did David build a temple? No, he didn't, right? He desired that, but that wasn't something that he was able to do in his life. David did not want God dwelling in this tent. David wanted that temple. He wanted that everything that goes along with that temple. He wanted that place for that ark, right? He wanted that permanent structure to show honor to God. But he never was able to do it. But he was able to move the ark to a hill. Anybody know what that hill's name was? Or referred to? Mount Zion. Okay, Mount Zion. I saw some of y'all mouthing it. I just couldn't hear it. Maybe you were saying it and I'm having trouble hearing. But yeah, it's Mount Zion is really that holy hill. And in fact, in Psalm 2, verse 6, David says, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. And so there in Psalm 2:6, he's even breaking it down a little bit more on this, literal hill. There's a hill where he was able to establish the ark. And, this initial line here is talking about this movable tent. And then he goes into something that's immovable. Can you move a hill? I guess if you have big enough construction equipment, right? You can move those hills, but that's what we're looking at here is it's going from this temporary structure. Again, remember the lines add to as we go through. This poetry gets deeper in meaning. First he talks about this movable hill, and then he gets into the movable tent, and then he gets into this hill. And that's kind of how this poetry works, and we'll see it throughout this psalm. So what is the question? What is he really asking here? He starts off with a question, and what's he truly trying to get at? Who can be in God's family? That's a great description, right? Who can be with God is what he's asking. Who is able to approach God, right? In that tabernacle or on that hill, who can be a part of that family? That is when we think of the tabernacle, that is how they approached God, right? That is how they were instructed to approach God, was through that tabernacle, and then of course the temple as well. In the word abide here, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? This means to live for an extended period of time, from what I can tell from my research. In the Hebrew, abide would be to live for an extended period of time. Now, when you go over and spend some time with family, you may abide with them, right? You may abide with them for a week, or maybe a little longer. Maybe you abide with them for a month. But it's that extended period of time. But it's not the idea that this is permanent. Abiding isn't necessarily permanent. generally if the word abide is used, the connotation is that we are going to spend some time there, but this is not the end. There'll be something after this abiding here. But again, when we look at that next line there, dwell has a different meaning, doesn't it? When you think about a dwelling, what are you talking about? If I'm in my dwelling, I'm in my house, right? You're not picking that thing up and moving it. That's my dwelling. That is where I dwell. That is where I plan to stay. That is my residence. I've established this here. And so again, thinking about how this poetry goes into basically a little bit of a deeper meaning, it starts off, who will dwell in this tent with God? The two things that are not permanent, that are movable, right? But who will abide? No, I got it backwards, didn't I? Who will abide in the tent, and who will dwell on the holy hill? So it is going into that deeper meaning here with each line of look, you can abide for temporary, but when you dwell with God, that is a permanent dwelling. It is to stay. Yep. You're part of that family to never leave, right? Who gets to do that is the question that's posed here. Who gets to stay in God's family forever? Do what? His child. Yeah, and that's what this psalm is going to break down for us. Who gets to do this, right? That's what we're going to look at here. And you can kind of think of it, who gets to dwell? I'm going to get my words backwards again. Who gets to abide in the tabernacle? I think of kind of, we're abiding here on earth, right? In our fleshly bodies, we're abiding. And we still want to be with God while we're abiding here on earth, right? And the reason we want to do that is so that we can then dwell in Mount Zion. Not some literal hill, Zion, but for eternity with God. And so that's the question being posed here. Who gets to be with God here in the now, and then who gets to spend eternity with God? All right, verse 2. He who walks uprightly, here's the answer, and works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. So continuing on, thinking about the poetry of this psalm, we have three things here listed in verse 2. Who gets to abide? This is those poetic elements. He who walks uprightly, he who works righteousness, and speaks truth in his heart. Walking uprightly. What do you think of when you think of walking uprightly? Doing what's right. All right. What else? Simpler. What is integrity? Okay. It says walking with integrity. Is that what it says? Okay. And that's a great word. When you think of somebody that's an upright person, you generally think of somebody that they're going to do the right thing regardless, right? There's no question. It's not going to be impacted by the situation. You know that person's got integrity, right? I also think even simpler, when I think of walking upright, I think of my Roro, who would tell me to stand up straight so that I didn't have a curved back when I got older. That's what she'd tell me. If you keep hunching over like that, you're going to be like that when you're older. That's what she'd tell me. Get up, stand upright. You hear that now? Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Jerry. Yeah, but standing upright, I mean, breaking it down to the simplest, he who walks uprightly. Now, obviously, we're not saying, hey, if you walk straight, then you get to dwell with God. But thinking about that, thinking about how man walks, right? Thinking about how our bodies are designed to walk. We're designed to walk uprightly. There's not a whole lot of other things that walk like us, is there? We're pretty set apart in just the fact of the way we move around. You say, oh, well, I've seen monkeys. Yeah, but they're like this, right? They kind of hang low and big gorillas and stuff. I mean, men walk uprightly. And then I also think, You know, thinking of this word uprightly, I think of as a kid watching the classic Disney stories. And the villain, how did they usually walk? Hunched over, right? I think of I don't want to get my Disney princess wrong. The bad person in Snow White, when she turns into that wretched old witch-looking thing, she's all hunched over, right? She's all hunched over, and she just looks nasty, right? She is not walking upright, and because she's doing something not with integrity. And that's what I think of. You can walk upright. You can be proud of who you are. You can be proud of what you do if you're walking with that integrity. Like you said, New American Standard. If you have that integrity, there's no reason to walk hunched over, to be ashamed, to kind of have to watch what's around you, right? But if you're poisoning an apple, like in Disney, right? You're hunched over and you're up to something. So it's that integrity, right? You think of how did the serpent walk around in the garden? On his belly, right? That's not with integrity, is it? There's no integrity there. On his belly. Not like a man should walk upright. And of course, I know I'm getting into the physical here, but also I think it does help to illustrate that integrity in action, that integrity way of walking, that upright way. And really, as we look at this, when it's talking about who gets to dwell with God, as we look through this psalm, it's really going to focus on really just treating people right. Really just doing right by people is what we look at in this psalm. Yes. Well, I'm okay in settings like this, but oh yeah. That's right. Be sure of who you are, right? Have that integrity. Don't be ashamed, right? You're my grandson. Stand up straight, right? That was her attitude there. Yeah, that's right. She'd probably still tell me if I saw her, if I wasn't standing up straight enough. All right. And works righteousness is that next thing in verse 2. Remember, there's three real positives that it gives us here in verse 2. Works righteousness, someone who works righteousness. I tend to focus on the word works here, right? When you're doing a work, what are you doing? Labor? Yeah, like you're actually doing something, right? You're actually doing something righteous. It's not just, hey, I'm just gonna hang back and not do anything wrong. It's I'm actively doing the right thing. I'm walking forward. I'm actually doing that work. I see a neighbor in distress, and I'm helping them. I'm doing a work of righteousness, right? I'm not just hanging out. I'm not just waiting for my time to come. I'm doing the works. Again, David's really, if you think about how we are to deal with our neighbors and think about this verse 2 here, it all coincides very much. All right, and speaks truth in his heart. What's the opposite of speaking truth? Lying, right? It speaks truth in his heart. You have integrity, you walk upright, you do works of righteousness, you're going to ensure that you're speaking truth and you're not speaking lies. But I also think about, it says here, speaks truth in his heart. When we think about things in our hearts, we're not generally thinking about something that's outward, right? Can you lie to yourself? Can you lie to yourself about how maybe righteous you are? Absolutely, right? You can be in a bad spot and really tell yourself some lies to your heart and just to make yourself feel better about it, can't you? Sometimes I think when we're really in the wrong, sometimes we tend to do that, don't we? I know I do. If I've figured out, oh man, I've done something wrong, now let me think about how I was right real quick. Let me justify this real quick. Let me talk to my heart about this so that I feel better about it. Right? Speaks truth in his heart. We got to justify. We got to corrupt that conscience a little so that it doesn't bother us, right? Sometimes that's that initial reaction if we're in the wrong, isn't it? I got to get my heart where I want it to be. I got to move that conscience a little so that I'm not bothered by this. Speaks truth in his heart. James 1. I'm a big fan of James, if y'all haven't noticed. I even thought, I was talking to Jessica, I thought about doing a lesson on James, but I probably wouldn't be able to keep from singing half the verses since we're teaching the Pew Packers James. But James 1:22 talks about being honest with ourselves. It says, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourself. I think that's real interesting. You can come to church and you can hear all the right things and really deceive yourself because, hey, I sat through that sermon and you know, everything Jason said was just spot on. But we never do it. We're deceiving ourselves, right? We can feel real good about something just by listening to it, just by hearing it, just by listening to the word. Oh yeah, that's right, you know, and amen it maybe, but not actually doing it. We deceive ourselves, and in turn, we can also sometimes deceive others, right? Well, that person is in church every single time the doors are open. They are righteous. You know, we might really be able to deceive others as well, but we won't deceive God, will we? So again, if we're wanting to spend eternity in God's family, can't be, let's see, how did it put? We have to speak the truth in our heart. We have to be honest with ourselves and where we stand so we know when we need to make changes. Verse 3. All right, remember we just did 3 positives. Now that, again, thinking of that poetry, now we're flipping the coin here. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil with his neighbor, nor does he take up reproach against his friend. So we had those 3 positive things that we should do, and now these are 3 kind of negative things that we really need to avoid if we want to dwell with God, right? He who does not backbite with his tongue. You know, when somebody says something real ugly to us, whether they're right or not, what is the first thing you want to do generally? Maybe not everybody. I know I do. What's the first thing you want to do? Yeah, say something right back, right? Backbite them. Get them right back. Oh, I'm getting you right back, right? Before you can gather your next thought, I've got something ready to backbite, don't you? You want to backbite at them. You want to, again, I said even if you're not right, it's that, man, it's hard to break sometimes, isn't it? We've got to break it if we want to dwell with God. I also kind of think here, when I think of backbiting with tongues, I think of talking about people behind their back, right? Slander, yeah, that backbiting, that slander, just tearing somebody down when they're not even there to defend it, right? That backbiting. And you know, I think about I work from home now. When I used to hold meetings in person, you know, if I maybe a supervisor or something would come, and after that meeting, they'd want to talk to me about something. Hey, all right, y'all can go. John, you need to stay. Okay? And then after we have that discussion, as soon as I walk out of that room, there's a group of people. What happened? What was said? Right? They want to know. People just want to know what's said. Or they've already talked about what was said, having no idea, right? They've already started that chatter going on about, oh, John got in trouble after the meeting. He's got to talk to that super. Let's all talk about it. Let's all get together and let's think of all the things that he could be in trouble for. And what they're really doing is backbiting, right? And come up with all sorts of things, and sometimes not even talk to you about it, right? People just want to know, and if they don't, they'll make something up a lot of times, right? That backbiting. Next line, nor does evil to his neighbor. Again, kind of what this whole thing seems to be focusing around. It's that theme we have here. Just treating people right? Not doing things to people that you shouldn't do. I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory there. I don't need to go too far into that, but just not being an evil person to people. Nor does he take reproach against his friend. Compare this to backbiting. Think about the backbiting we talked about, and then think about taking up reproach against someone else. When you take something up, you're taking that, all right? Now I'm absorbing it, right? It's one thing to have people that are out slandering you, right? I mean, that hurts. But how far does it go if nobody takes it up? It stops, right? If nobody's there to absorb that and say, tell me more. What happened? Oh, I got to hear this. To take up that reproach against your friend, if it stops. It's no longer a problem, right? That backbiting stops, but that person that takes up the reproach just feeds it and makes it worse, right? They just continue to make that worse. If you may say, well, I'm not much of a gossiper. I'm more of a listener, right? You're just giving that gossiper something to do, right? Is it any better to just listen? It's not. Right. Yeah, why soak that information in, right? It's your friend. Yeah, that's closer than a neighbor, right? It's got a much different connotation. That's right. Yeah, so you have the, can you read that again real quick? I lost my mental place. Okay. So like we were saying, that first inclination when somebody's done you wrong is to get them right back, right? But Romans there is saying, don't get them right back. Think of how to honor them. And I may have mentioned this before, but I think of my mom. So when we moved to South Florida from Lincoln, Nebraska, we moved into really a neighborhood like I'd never been a part of before. People that are just so particular about the height of their grass and the specific color and how the driveway looks just right. And maybe some of y'all are like that, and I'm not saying that's a bad hobby, but we I don't remember what we were out doing, but we missed our turn, and so my dad pulled into somebody's driveway and backed out, and that person came out screaming. I mean, don't you dare ever turn around in this driveway again in this neighborhood, right? And I remember sitting in that car being like, oh, what's my dad going to do to this guy now? You know, my dad's 6'4", and this person wasn't. And you know, I think of, oh, here, it's on, you know. He apologized, and he left, and my mom went home, and she made him some bread and brought it and apologized and said, here's some homemade bread, and we're new down the road, or, you know, I don't remember exactly how long we'd been there, but I can remember my mom making baked goods for people that had really been kind of ugly, right? Don't repay that evil for evil. I mean, what impact does that have when you're evil to somebody that's just been evil to you versus you do something nice to them? It's tough, isn't it? It's hard. That is not my first reaction. I got to work on that myself. All right, let's continue looking. So there's the three positives, 3 negatives. How long do I go? 15 after? 5 after? 10 after? Am I there? Watch for the kids. Okay, I'll listen for them. If I don't hear them, somebody crack the door open and I'll hear them. In whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those that fear the Lord. So we've got these contrasting statements, right? In whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. The world doesn't despise the vile person. And we've talked about this with the Psalms before, I believe, in here. You think of some of the most vile people in popular culture, and they are some of the wealthiest, well-to-do people on earth. They are some of the most successful people in the world's eyes, are those people that are just vile and really don't treat people right and do not match up to these things. But he honors those that fear the Lord. God doesn't have that standard, does he? I mean, and really, when we think about our lives and we think about our neighbors and we think about how people view us, what really matters is how God sees us, isn't it? He honors those that fear the Lord. The vile person may have all the glory here, but that's very short-lived, right? They may abide in that glory, but they won't dwell in it, will they? All right, listening for the kids. He who swears to his own hurt, but does not change. If you dwell with God, if you want to dwell with God, you've also got to be a man of your word, right? He who swears to his own hurt and does not change. We got to be real careful what we commit to people, don't we? What we say we're going to do. Because I think of people that, you know, that literally say, you know, I swear to God when they're talking about things. That is a scary thought, isn't it? To swear to God that you're going to do something. Because if you don't fulfill that, what have you just done? You've made a promise to God you're going to do something in saying that, right? And it's so flippant the way we say that, or some people say that, it's a scary thought. We have got to do what we're going to say we do. He who swears to his own hurt. If you're going around promising all these things that you can't fulfill, you're just hurting yourself, right? And does not change. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay is what I think of there, right? You ever try to, I know some of y'all do because I see your posts. You ever try to buy or sell something on Facebook? And you set up a specific time and you twist your whole day around to make sure that you can meet this person at that specific time for this agreed amount of money or agreed amount of trade or whatever it is, and you get there and you've completely messed up your whole Saturday to make sure that you can uphold your part of the deal, and you never hear from them. I see lots of heads nodding. Yep. right? If you say you're going to do it, just do it. It's about how you treat your neighbor. And that's, I've gotten to the point, I'm not going to meet you. This is where I'll be at this time, be there or not. Because so many people don't seem to hold on to their word anymore. Oh, yeah. Handshake, no. Well, that's right. That's right. A handshake doesn't mean what it used to, does it? If we even shake hands. I guess if we have hand sanitizer handy, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's if you want to dwell with God, you got to be a man of your word. And if you're not, you're truly just lying. I mean, that is what it boils down to. If you say you're going to do something and you don't, you've lied. He who does not put his money at usury, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. Y'all know what usury is? Not a word used very often. Interest. Yeah. Anything wrong with charging interest? I mean, right here it says usury. Well, anything wrong with interest? Plus, I mean, if somebody is really desperate for something, right? I mean, they really need something. And you say, all right, it'll be 75% interest. Right? That's absorbent. Like it's ridiculous. There's no way that person's going to be able to pay that back. Or if they do, it's definitely you taking advantage of them, right? And that's what this is about. It's about not taking advantage of people when they're in times of need, right? Now, is there anything wrong with charging interest? I don't believe so. I mean, there's plenty of businesses that charge interest, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it's the interest to the point where it's taking advantage of people. Because if you look at that next line, it says, "Nor does he take a bribe against the innocent." So again, thinking of the way the poetry in this works and the way it adds on. Now we're talking about the innocent. And why would he talk about a bribe against innocent? What does it say, King James? Reward? Don't take a reward against the innocent. Okay, so don't. I guess you could say just make it your goal to make money off of people that are less fortunate, right? And then looks like I'm done, and I don't hear kids. He who does these things shall never be moved. Going back to that initial thought, right? We started off with abiding, which was that movable, I got that right, abiding, yeah. That movable tent, right? Yeah. Doing things with the wrong motive, absolutely. He who does these things shall not be moved. So going back to that start with the movable tent is how we started off, but then we firmed it up with that immovable Mount Zion, right? He who does these things shall never be moved. When our life's over, and if we've done these things, if we've done the things that God has told us to do, and we're spending our eternity with Him, do we have to worry about that being moved? We don't, do we? We don't. But even simpler than that, immovable. Somebody that goes by these things, that sticks to their word, that walks with integrity, that doesn't take advantage of people, do they really have to be concerned about remembering how they treated specific people or specific promises they've made to people that they may or may not remember to fulfill? Or do they have to worry about that? They don't. They can be immovable, right? They can be sure of themselves. They can walk upright with that integrity. All right, I had a little bit more, but I'm not going to get into it. I think we're at 10 after. So I appreciate the comment.